For years, Emily Carter lived in anonymity, cleaning luxurious rooms where no one even remembered her name. Every morning began with the same sound of a mop dragging, the same blue uniform, the same indifferent looks from people who walked past her as if she didn't exist. She carried the weight of humiliation and sacrifice, not knowing that her silence would one day become the birthplace of a miracle. While others talked about goals and million-dollar deals, she was secretly learning, translating the world in her own way with patience, faith, and determination. But one day, when everything seemed lost, destiny would place her before a choice that could change not only her life, but the lives of everyone around her. And it's in that turning point that her story begins. Subscribe to the channel and discover how a simple act can turn the impossible into destiny. The digital clock read 10:47 a.m. when the heavy silence of the meeting room was shattered by a sharp sound, the impatient snap of Michael Turner's fingers. The CEO paced back and forth, suit flawless, eyes cold. The Russian investors watched him with unreadable expressions, while on the screen, million-dollar charts flickered like a cruel reminder of what was about to collapse. The translator was gone. No one knew where he was, and every second felt like a sentence being passed. Michael wiped the sweat from his forehead, trying to disguise his despair beneath a mask of control, but his eyes gave him away. "If we lose this deal, it's over," someone murmured in the back. Chairs creaked, papers shuffled, and chaos spread like smoke. It was humiliation disguised as formality, the kind of embarrassment that ruins reputations and silences pride. The air conditioner blew a cold wind, but the atmosphere burned. One of the investors whispered something in Russian that sounded like mockery. Michael pretended not to understand, but his jaw tightened. It hurt, not just the deal, but his ego, wounded in front of everyone. How could this happen, he thought. A small mistake with the weight of disaster, a missing translator, a communication breakdown, an empire at risk. And ironically, no one in that room realized that the real turning point of that moment was right next door, a woman sweeping the floor, unaware that the fate of everyone there was about to rest in her hands. Chaos didn't scream, it whispered. It was the sound of pens tapping, of glances crossing, of silent shame growing heavier by the minute. The room smelled of cold coffee and fear. Texto Padriomikal tried to keep his composure, but humiliation already hovered like a ghost. "Maybe this is a sign we should just give up," one of the partners suggested, voice trembling. "Giving up is not an option," Michael replied sharply. The word millionaire echoed in his mind like a distant promise. This contract was his chance to make the company a global name, and now, because of a vanished translator, everything was slipping through his fingers like sand. In the reflection of the glass walls, tense faces stared back. There was something tragic about the scene. Powerful men in tailored suits being undone by an invisible detail. That's how life teaches its lessons, through what no one sees coming. Michael wondered what he'd tell the press if the deal collapsed. Public humiliation was inevitable. A man used to winning, now hostage to the improbable. "Does anyone here speak Russian?" he asked, clinging to a thread of hope. Silence answered. Texto Padro owned in that silence. The unexpected began to breathe. The tension thickened, almost tangible. Russian words filled the pages of the contract, unreadable, frustrating. One investor raised an eyebrow, impatient. "Time is money," he said in heavy accented English. Michael tried to smile, the kind of smile that hides fear more than it reassures. Still no sign of the translator. And in the corner of the room, Emily, the cleaning lady, watched quietly as she picked up coffee cups and crumpled papers. She had no idea that moment would change her life forever. The sound of a glass falling broke the air. It shattered across the table and floor, as if fate itself had decided to intervene. "Damn it!" Michael exclaimed. A security guard rushed forward, but Emily got there first, kneeling to clean. From the floor, she heard the CEO whisper, "I can't believe I'm about to lose everything over this." And right there, in that unguarded confession, something lit up inside her. She understood every word in Russian, every phrase, every tone. It was a secret she had carried in silence, maybe out of fear, maybe out of humility. While the men in suits spoke of numbers and reputation, Emily felt her heart race. Life had taught her that opportunities don't announce themselves, they happen. And sometimes they come disguised as disasters. Her mind raced. Should I say something? What if I mess up? The memories of past humiliations cut through her courage. "You're just a cleaning lady," they used to say. But a quiet voice inside her insisted, "Maybe this is the lesson the world needs to see." She took a deep breath, stood up slowly, and for the first time in years, dared to break the silence of the powerful. "Excuse me, Mr. Turner." Her voice trembled, but it was clear. Everyone turned at once. The scraping of chairs echoed like thunder. Michael frowned. "Emily, what is it now?" She swallowed hard, feeling the weight of all those eyes on her. I can help." One of the investors chuckled softly, the sound cut like a knife. But Emily didn't flinch. "I understand Russian," she said. The silence that followed was almost tangible. Michael blinked. "What did you just say?" She repeated firmly this time. "I understand it, and I can translate." The entire room froze. For a moment, the world hung between disbelief and hope. Eyes darted, breaths stopped. Michael stepped closer, incredulous. "You speak Russian?" Emily nodded. Fluently. He looked around for a better option. There wasn't one. "Are you sure about this?" he asked. "Yes, sir." She could feel the judgment in every stare, but she also knew it was now or never. Sometimes destiny chooses its heroes from the invisible ones, and she was about to prove it. The CEO exhaled and said quietly, "Then translate." Emily breathed in, lifted her chin, and took her first step forward. The reactions were mixed. Doubt, curiosity, even sarcasm. "A cleaning lady?" someone muttered. But her gaze didn't waver. Right there, among ties and contracts, a story was about to be born, one no one would ever forget. Destiny, with its ironic sense of timing, had chosen the perfect stage. And as Emily walked toward the center of the room, a new chapter, for the company and for her, was about to begin. Voices overlapped, a dissonant chorus of nerves and frustration. Some argued about deadlines, others about clauses. And everyone forgot Emily still stood there holding her cleaning rag like an invisible shield. Michael watched her with a skeptical look, torn between laughter and despair. "You really think you can fix this?" he asked coldly. She answered calmly, "I think I can try." The words hung in the air. Time seemed to slow. That simple woman, long used to being ignored, was about to challenge a hierarchy built on ego, expensive suits, and quiet prejudice. Emily took a deep breath. Inside, her heart pounded like a drum, but her voice came out steady. Fear had always been her co-worker. She'd cleaned bathrooms, hallways, and sometimes her own hidden tears. But in that moment, fear stepped back. Something greater pushed her forward. The investors exchanged quick phrases in Russian. She understood them all. "They're saying this is a waste of time," she translated. Michael raised an eyebrow. "And what's your reply?" Emily looked him straight in the eyes and said softly, "Tell them that sometimes the best lesson comes from the one you least expect." The air seemed to vibrate. Her words echoed through the room, stirring both discomfort and admiration. One of the investors, square-jawed, light-eyed, tilted his head. "She really does understand," he murmured in Russian. Michael realized, almost in disbelief, that this woman was saving the empire he had built. It was a strange mix of gratitude and shame. He thought of all the times he'd passed her in the hallway without even saying good morning. All the speeches he'd given about humility, yet never once truly looked at the person who cleaned his office. As Emily translated, her hands trembled, but her mind flowed like a river. Every Russian phrase turned effortlessly into English. It was a gift buried beneath layers of invisibility. The company had always thrived on hidden talents and silenced voices, and here was one finally breaking through. Michael watched, stunned, as the cleaning lady became the bridge between failure and success. The room's collective humiliation slowly gave way to hope. "How did you learn Russian?" one of the directors asked, intrigued. Emily hesitated, then replied, "I worked for years cleaning rooms in a hotel where Russian diplomats stayed. One of them taught me out of gratitude." The answer was simple, yet powerful. It was a story of learning without classrooms, of curiosity born from necessity. And maybe that was the real secret to success, learning even when no one expects you to. Michael smiled faintly for the first time. "Incredible," he murmured. She replied, "It's not incredible, sir, it's survival." Her tone changed the entire room. The investors, once arrogant, now listened with respect. Emily wasn't just translating words, she was translating intentions, gestures, emotions. It was as if her voice itself had the power to rewrite the course of that meeting. Michael sat in silence, watching every movement, absorbing the lesson hidden in that moment. Sometimes, he thought, destiny sends its teachers in the most unexpected forms. And ironically, the woman he'd barely noticed before was now the one making him feel like a true millionaire, not because of money, but because of the chance to learn. In the corner, one of the secretaries watched with teary eyes. It was both beautiful and painful to see Emily standing at the center. How many times had she been the target of jokes? How many cruel comments had been made about her worn-out uniform? Now, every word that left her mouth erased an invisible scar. And the world may be small, the secretary thought, but God knows how to expand the space for those who deserve it. Humiliation was giving way to reverence. It was like watching a rebirth. Michael looked at the clock. Time passed, but no one seemed to care. The meeting that began as a disaster now had an audience completely captivated. Emily smiled discreetly as she translated the final clauses of the contract. Confidence grew with every sentence. There was a new light in her eyes, the glow of someone realizing that the impossible can happen. The CEO watched in silence, thinking, how many Emilys are out there, unaware that they carry a gift powerful enough to change destinies? Then one of the investors stood up and extended his hand. "Spasibo," he said with a small smile. Emily returned the gesture, surprised. The touch of recognition made her throat tighten. It felt as if the universe itself whispered the humiliation was only a rehearsal for your grand moment. Michael took a deep breath, relieved. The deal was saved. But he knew, the real agreement wasn't about business, it was about humanity. When the meeting ended, no one stood up right away. They remained there, silent, processing what had just happened. Emily picked up the cleaning cloth she had left on the table, looked around, and realized the gazes had changed. She was no longer invisible. She was someone whose worth had finally been seen. And as she quietly left the room, she felt that something even greater was about to happen. Destiny, once again, was breathing down the hallway. The room, once cold and arrogant, now seemed to breathe with Emily. Every phrase she translated sounded like a breath of life in an atmosphere that moments earlier had been suffocating. Michael sat motionless in his leather chair, fascinated. It was like watching a corporate miracle unfold before his eyes. Emily wasn't just translating, she was interpreting feelings, intentions, gestures. The investors, once impatient, now leaned forward, attentive like students before an unlikely teacher. Power had quietly changed hands. That simple woman was leading a $1 million negotiation without realizing she was also negotiating her own destiny. The voices in the room found a new rhythm. Emily translated with such ease and grace that even the missing professional interpreter, had he appeared, would have felt ashamed. One of the Russian investors said something respectful, and she replied naturally in Russian. The group laughed, and the tension melted like ice under sunlight. Michael watched in silence, and for the first time that morning felt proud, not of himself, but of someone who reminded him where true strength comes from. The secret of success, he thought, lay in recognizing the value hidden within the invisible. Every word Emily spoke carried symbolic weight. It was as if with each flawless translation she was cleaning not only the floor she used to mop, but also the prejudice that clung to the company's walls. The men who once ignored her now hung on every word. How could someone like her stay hidden for so long? Murmured the CFO, not realizing his comment was an admission of blindness. Emily stayed steady, her breathing controlled, her focus unwavering. It felt as though the entire world had narrowed to that single moment. Michael no longer saw her as an employee, but as a phenomenon, a human being who faced fear and turned humiliation into strength. He realized there was more wisdom in that woman than in many executives with MBAs. Maybe the secret to leadership is right here in front of me, he thought. It was a lesson disguised as coincidence. While the investors discussed figures and projections, he reflected on values, not financial ones, but human ones. One of the Russians asked her to translate a complex clause about profit sharing. Emily took a deep breath, analyzed the words, and with confidence, explained the paragraph in English and then in Portuguese. Her command was impressive. The investors nodded, satisfied. Michael felt a wave of relief run through his chest. The contract was saved, but more than that, the company's reputation, his image, and the respect of everyone in the room were being rebuilt, brick by brick, through the courage of a woman who, until that day, had lived on the margins. But Emily wasn't thinking about glory. As she translated, memories of crying alone in the storage room flashed back, the laughter of others echoing in her mind. Cleaning ladies shouldn't dream, they used to say. But the dream had never left her. It had just waited for the right moment to reveal itself. Now standing before the same kind of people who once looked down on her, she spoke with the calm confidence of someone who learned that opportunities don't ask permission, they simply happen. And only those who carry humility in their hearts can recognize them. Time seemed to move differently. With every word, Emily grew, and Michael awakened. He remembered his own poor childhood, the humiliations he'd swallowed climbing his way up. Maybe that's why, looking at Emily, he felt a mix of empathy and regret. How many people like her have crossed my path without me ever noticing, he wondered. Success had blinded him, and that morning forced him to see. Sometimes, destiny creates storms not to punish us, but to wake us up. At the end of the meeting, Emily's final translation landed like a symbolic period at the end of a long lesson. The investors stood, smiling, shaking hands. "Excellent work," they said in Russian. "It was an honor," she replied. Michael, still seated, watched her with awe. The woman who had entered as a cleaning lady now left as a savior. The reversal was so poetic it could have been a movie, but it wasn't. It was life reminding him that the impossible lives in the hearts of the persistent. When the meeting was over, Emily quietly gathered her things as if nothing had happened. Michael approached, hesitant. "Emily, you surprised me," he said. She smiled humbly. "I just did what needed to be done," he insisted. "You did much more than that. You saved all of us." She lowered her gaze. "Maybe God just gave me a chance to give back a little of what I've learned." Michael was speechless. Sometimes the simplest answers carry the greatest lessons. As everyone left the room, Michael stayed behind, staring out the window. The reflection showed not a powerful CEO, but a man who had just learned what greatness truly means. Deep down, he knew that moment wouldn't end there. The world needed to hear the story of the woman who turned humiliation into triumph and silence into power, and he would make sure of it. The next step would be decisive, and it would change Emily's destiny forever. The next morning dawned with a brightness that only follows a conquered storm. The news spread through the company faster than breakfast in the cafeteria. The cleaning lady saved the deal. People whispered in the halls. Emily tried to carry on with her work as usual, but it was impossible to ignore the curious looks, the hushed voices, the newly polite smiles. Michael Turner arrived early, thoughtful, quiet. He entered the same meeting room where, just a day before, he'd felt the weight of humiliation, and took a deep breath. That space now held a new meaning: redemption. While the directors gathered to discuss next steps, Michael stood by the window. The reflection staring back was of a changed man. The pride that once made him walk with his chin high had given way to gratitude. The lesson still echoed in his mind. No one is too small to teach something great. He remembered Emily's voice, her steady gaze, her calm amid the chaos. There had been something almost sacred about that moment, as if destiny itself had decided to correct their course. And without realizing it, Michael was about to make one of the most human decisions of his career. Across town, Emily was getting ready for another day of work. She still wore the same blue uniform and the same worn shoes. The world might have seen her differently, but inside there was still hesitation. Will they treat me differently now? She wondered. The phone rang. It was from the board of directors. For a second, her heart raced. They want me to go to Mr. Turner's office, she told a coworker nervously. Her friend laughed. Go on, millionaire. Emily laughed too, unsure if it was a joke or a prophecy. When she walked into the room, the air felt lighter. Michael greeted her with a genuine smile. Emily, have a seat. She did his ass, still unsure why she'd been called. He took a deep breath and said, Yesterday you didn't just save a contract. You saved this company's name, the confidence of hundreds of employees. And most of all, you taught me a lesson I'll never forget. Emily tried to respond, but the words caught in her throat. I didn't do anything special, sir. Michael smiled. Yes, you did. You did what great leaders do. You acted when everyone else froze. A knock at the door cut the moment short. One of the directors walked in carrying papers and reports. Mr. Turner, we need your signature on the contract with the Russians. Michael looked at Emily. I think the translator should sign with me. The director's eyes widened. The translator? Michael nodded. Yes, because she's the one who won it. Silence spread through the room. Emily blushed, unsure where to put her hands. I can't do that, Michael insisted. Yes, you can, and you should. When the pen touched the paper, something symbolic happened. With that stroke, it was as if Emily erased every time she'd been invisible. Each signature felt like a piece of humiliation being turned into purpose. When she finished, she looked at the CEO and smiled. Thank you for trusting me. He answered, It wasn't trust, Emily. It was recognition. His eyes said more than any speech, a silent apology, not only for him, but for everyone who had ever belittled her. That afternoon, the whole company stopped to applaud as Emily walked down the hallway. There was no official ceremony, just honest clapping and teary eyes. Every step echoed off the walls. The lesson has been delivered. The secret of success, Michael thought, isn't who speaks the loudest, but who does what's needed at the right time. And ironically, the quietest employee was the one who changed everyone's course the most. Hours later, Michael called a new meeting, this time without tension, fear, or missing translators. Opening the session, he said something that stuck. Yesterday I learned that true leadership isn't about authority, it's about humility. And that the greatest talents might be sweeping the floor while we stare at the ceiling. The room held a respectful silence. Emily, seated in the back, felt her eyes fill with tears. For the first time, she didn't feel out of place. When the contract was officially announced, the Russian investors sent a letter of thanks with an unexpected invitation, a proposal to partner so Emily could join the international communications team. Began as a disaster had become a turning point. Michael smiled as he read the message and thought, sometimes God writes the biggest miracles on the pages of humiliation, and there he understood. Success is only real when it's shared. That night, Emily came home exhausted but at peace. She sat at her simple kitchen table and stared at the ceiling. The tears came, but they were tears of gratitude. The impossible had happened. She didn't know what would come next, but she felt the best was just beginning, because sometimes the greatest victories don't end, they simply change form, making way for the next chapter. The days that followed felt like a waking dream. Emily still arrived early, wearing the same blue uniform and simple badge, but something had changed in the way people looked at her. She wasn't invisible anymore. The echo of past humiliation now sounded like a soundtrack of overcoming. She's the woman who saved the Russian deal, people said in the halls. When Michael saw her, he nodded with respect, not out of duty but genuine admiration. What used to be routine now carried a different shine, the shine of someone finally seen. The secret of transformation was there, not in money, not in status, but in the quiet courage to act when no one believes. A new badge arrived at her desk with a different title, Emily Carter, International Translator. She held it with trembling hands, feeling the symbolic weight of those words. She cried softly, texto padre, not from sadness, but relief. How many times had she thought about giving up? How many floors had she cleaned while dreaming of something bigger, not knowing when or how it would come? Now life handed her the reward of someone who waited with faith. God knows the right time, she whispered. In that moment, it wasn't the cleaning lady being recognized. It was a human being who rewrote her story with courage. Michael called her back to the main office. Emily, we have a proposal. She smiled, curious. The Russians want a long-term partnership, and we want you to lead communication with them. What do you think? Emily was speechless. She had never imagined a role like that. Mr. Turner, I don't know if I deserve this. He didn't hesitate. You deserve it more than anyone here. Those words broke something inside her, an old wall built from years of doubt and rejection. Yesterday's humiliation had become the foundation of an entire future. In the months that followed, Emily dove into courses, meetings, and trips. English and Russian became her bridges to the world. With every new challenge, she remembered the first day she found the courage to raise her hand in that room. Nothing happens by accident, she told herself. Deep down, she knew that day wasn't luck. It was the result of years spent in silence, learning, observing, waiting for the right moment. The secret of success had always been there, in those who prepare when no one is watching. Michael watched closely. The company flourished like never before. The Russian investors became steady partners, and new contracts kept coming. The company's name appeared in business magazines with headlines like "The Translator's Miracle." But for him, the miracle wasn't in the numbers. It was in the lesson Emily had taught everyone. True human value isn't measured by titles, but by actions. How many Emilys does the world still ignore? He wondered, looking at the horizon through his office window. One day, Emily was invited to share her story at an entrepreneurship event. The auditorium was packed. On stage, she held the microphone with trembling hands, but her gaze was steady. I didn't come from a rich family. I didn't have opportunities. I was humiliated, ignored, underestimated. But I learned that God hides lessons in our falls. And sometimes you have to clean the floor to understand the value of what's above it. The audience stood, moved to tears and applause. Emily smiled, not out of vanity, but gratitude. Time passed and the company was never the same. A new kind of respect filled the air, the kind that's born from empathy. Employees who had been invisible started to be heard, valued, promoted. Michael created an internal talent recognition program inspired by Emily's story. We'll call it Project Secret, he said, remembering her words. The name was symbolic, a reminder that greatness is hidden in people the world refuses to see. Emily stayed the same, simple. She didn't trade in her old car or stop greeting everyone with a smile. But now, doors opened naturally. In every international meeting, with every precise translation, she left a touch of humanity even the most seasoned professionals couldn't replicate. Humility is the universal language of winners, she liked to say. Humiliation had become an emotional inheritance of a living reminder that real power doesn't need applause. One Friday morning, Michael called her in once again. "Emily, I want you to know, you've changed this company." She laughed softly. "No, Mr. Turner, I just did what needed to be done." He shook his head. "No, you taught us what it truly means to do what's necessary, even without realizing you were the missing piece." She stayed quiet. Sometimes words aren't enough for gratitude. She simply smiled, eyes glistening, remembering every step of her journey. And that's how a cleaning lady became the heart of $1 million corporation, not because she sought power, but because she had faith, courage, and purpose. Her story became a symbol of resilience, proof that even the deepest humiliation can hide the beginning of a miracle. If you believe the impossible can happen, like this video, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from, because maybe the next comeback the world will celebrate will be yours.